Chrollo, the Phantom Troupe's elusive leader, and arguably one of anime's most profound and influential leaders, despite the majority of his screen time being restricted to one arc in the Hunter x Hunter series. I've already done a video dissecting the character from the ground up, divulging the philosophy and intentions behind his mysterious actions and the core values of the Phantom Troupe. This time I'm diving deep into his qualities as a leader and what makes him so brilliant as a mastermind and heart of the spider, using Robert Greene's international bestseller, The 48 Laws of Power, to draw the possible principles that have been utilized by the writer to make the group as formidable as they appeared in the Yorknew City Arc. This time, however, we have some valuable new chapters that have just been released in the series manga that provide a detailed backstory of the group's formation and who Chrollo was as a kid and the events that shaped him into who he is. The mystery the group was built on has been at least partially demystified in the last few weeks, so unlike my last video, which featured a lot of educated guesses and speculation to formulate why the group became what it is, which surprisingly have just been solidified with this new information, this one can draw on the exact details of what happened in Meteor City to birth its infamous Phantom Troupe. So let's get right into it, shall we? Law 6. Court attention at all costs. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out, be conspicuous at all costs. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colourful, more mysterious than the bland, timid masses. So let's get the obvious one out of the way. The Phantom Troupe reputation is built on its loud and ruthless attacks. Like their massacre of the Kurta clan or their attack on the mafia-hosted auction, they complete their objectives with unwavering intent and conviction. Them attacking an auction hosted by the leaders of the underground sends the message that they do not fear even the biggest fish in the pond, and this is linked to their reputation, which we'll get into in a bit. In terms of their massacre of the Kurta, their methods of retrieving their valuable eyes were absolutely horrific. Since the Kurta's eyes were known to change colour and become more intense as they experienced more and more intense emotion, the children were murdered in front of the adults, so their eyes were as scarlet as possible before being harvested. The main reason behind the Kurta massacre, or if there even is one, is still uncertain. In the series, however, Uvo mentions that Chrollo liked the eyes, so the opinions are split, with some people believing that was the sole reason and others believing there must have been a bigger reason for their actions. And this is mainly a result of the note they left on a corpse of their massacre, with the note stating, "We'll accept anything you leave here, but don't ever take anything away from us." The Phantom Troupe attacked where it would hurt the most, and therefore courted the attention Chrollo desired. The Kurta's eyes were known as one of the treasures of the Hunter x Hunter world. Therefore, by targeting them, they sent the message that we don't play by your rules, and that we take what we want. Also, since these eyes were so sought after, they could be auctioned off and sold on the black market, as a result immortalizing their ruthless deed. As every time these eyes come to the spotlight, so do the lengths the Phantom Troupe are willing to go to. What is not seen is as though it did not exist. The Phantom Troupe was formed on the flames of resentment and revenge the kids of Meteor City burned with. They want to hurt the world that hurt them and their abandoned community so much whilst they were growing up. If they are not seen, then it would be as though they did not exist, and the world wouldn't get burned by their flames of anger. Chrollo understood this and therefore formulated the plan to mercilessly massacre and attack a group of people who are well known for their physical traits in the Hunter x Hunter world. It's ironic how Kurapika, who survived this massacre as he was away on a trip during the event, was instilled with the same desire for revenge that the Phantom Troupe carried as a result. It's almost as if their message was fueled with such resolve and toxicity that they could infect their victims with the same hatred that they carry. And this of course forms an instrumental part of the Kurapika we met at the beginning of the series. If we refer to the latest manga chapters, we see a young Phantom Troupe suffering the loss of their friend Sarasa. They all combined their efforts to find her as she had gone missing and hadn't turned up to the performance of the play they had made. Eventually they find their little friend dismembered and left in a bag with a note attached to her head. Chrollo was the only one who could read, and when asked what the note said, he states that he will never say, and that he's taken those words to his grave. The Phantom Troupe was formed by a group of kids who had nothing but each other and were traumatized over and over again by having those they loved taken away from them through countless kidnappings and murders. The murder of Sarasa was the last straw that led to their resolve being solidified. They decided they will no longer be helpless anymore, and this is paralleled by Chrollo realizing that this meant so much to him that he was willing to become the villain. Chrollo decides to sacrifice himself and his humanity to become the embodiment of Meteor City's rage and hatred, and this perfectly explains his identity crisis I alluded to in my original video. He decided to sacrifice his humanity to achieve his goal, and therefore struggles to remember who he even was before the spider. He's Chrollo, the man who bears the resentment of his city. He's one emotion, one idea, one goal. And this is reflected by his group. They all seem to share one mind and are extremely in tune with one another. And this is most likely because their leader and his emotions are so clear to them. He exists to bear their suffering, and therefore they have no problem sacrificing themselves for him and the cause. Human beings are characterized by being able to experience a spectrum of emotions, and this is why we are able to experience empathy. As we experience happiness, sadness, pain and suffering, we are gathering a pot of experiences that allows us to connect to each other and understand one another. Chrollo gave this up. He was clearly a very sensitive child, as we saw in the manga, and in tune with the emotions of a regular child. But when his helplessness to protect those closest to him became too much for this young child to handle, he decided to sacrifice his life for the protection of his home. Not much different to Gon sacrificing his life to allow him to defeat Pito, or Kurapika's battle, where he's slipping in a similar direction but keeps getting pushed back by his new friends. This is sad, however also an intelligent trade for becoming the leader of an effective organization. If he's out of touch with his humanity, nothing stands in the way between him and his goal. He doesn't experience any remorse for his actions because he gave himself up to the cause so that his friends can be safe. Therefore, he doesn't waver because he doesn't feel fear. His vision doesn't become clouded because he has no egotistical desire. He doesn't discriminate because he feels no biases. He becomes the perfect leader. I think this also accounts for his cold, rational and unwavering temperament that I commented on in my original video. Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. People have an overwhelming desire to believe in something. Become the focal point of such desire by offering them a cause, a new faith to follow. Keep your words vague but full of promise. Emphasize enthusiasm over rationality and clear thinking. Give your new disciples rituals to perform. Ask them to make sacrifices on your behalf. In the absence of organized religion and grand causes, your new belief system will bring you untold power. The Phantom Troupe was birthed of the shared suffering of all the members. They had all engaged in a play that they were going to perform. Then they find their missing friend murdered and dismembered for no real reason. In that moment, they all were confronted with their sheer helplessness in the face of the outside world that was tormenting them for its enjoyment and to exercise its power. Suffering births a will to change something. In that moment, Chrollo's resolve being the strongest became apparent to everyone else. Maybe because it's clear that he was the most sensitive one among them, and that's why they nominated him to become their leader. Their desire was to hurt those who hurt them, and they saw a light, twisted as it may have been, emerging from Chrollo as a means to achieving that desire. So they all bought in, and any organization that is bound by suffering and one mind and desire is going to be effective and dangerous. Money, glory and prestige. Do you truly believe any of us care for those things? This is a quote from Chrollo that now makes crystal clear sense. They all share the same desire. The group was not formed due to mutual benefit. The group is the embodiment of a sacrifice all of its members made to a cause they deem necessary in a cruel world that mocked them for their helplessness. And that sacrifice was their humanity and identity. No conflicting ideals exist as a part of this group, and because they know each other so well, they can trust one another. Newton's first law. A body will remain at rest or continue to move with constant velocity unless acted on by another force. One force acts as part of the troop, and this is why Chrollo can trust them in these missions. There is no breakdown or stopping due to conflicting ideals. Their velocity is constant and isn't disrupted by ego trips or fallouts that plague most organizations. Their resolve is complete, and this is why they are able to attack the mafia auction and come out unscathed. Law 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Reputation is a cornerstone of power. Through reputation alone, you can intimidate and win. Once it slips, however, you are vulnerable and will be attacked on all sides. Make your reputation unassailable. Always be alert to potential attacks and thwart them before they happen. Meanwhile, learn to destroy your enemies by opening holes in their own reputations, then stand aside and let public opinion hang them. By attacking the underground auction, they attracted the eyes of the entire world and sent a clear message. At the same time, they damaged the reputation of the mafia, as the auction was completely set upside down by a handful of criminals. This damaged reputation leaves them vulnerable to attacks from other enemies who grow more confident by seeing their weaknesses. The mafia sent hits after the troop as a result, remarking that they were going to kill their entire families, to send a warning to those who tried to do something similar in the future. This was of course when they had faked their deaths, and before the mafia found out that the troop were from Meteor City, after which they decided to rescind the bounties that had been placed on them as a way of prioritizing their relationship with Meteor City. In this case, because the troop has nothing to lose, the mafia cannot hurt them back. And of course, this was probably a part of Chrollo's calculations, giving him the confidence to make such a bold decision. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Be wary of friends. They will betray you more quickly, for they are easily aroused to envy. They also become spoiled and tyrannical. But hire a former enemy and he will be more loyal than a friend, because he has more to prove. In fact, you have more to fear from friends than from enemies. If you have no enemies, find a way to make them. If you look at the backstory of the troupe, we can see that Uvo and some of the other members weren't friendly with Chrollo from the beginning. The manga pages show us that they were at odds with each other, fighting for cassette tapes. Chrollo was still a kid and Uvo was a feared brute. By putting on the shows and entertaining the people of Meteor City, Chrollo earned the respect of his peers, and when it came time to form the troupe, Chrollo knew Uvo and the others could be trusted as a part of this group, as they had aligned and connected with him as a result of who he is, rather than because they were friendly with him before that. By employing former enemies, Chrollo has a good group of people he can rely on, and this also relates to Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. If you need to turn to an ally for help, do not bother to remind him of your past assistance and good deeds. He will find a way to ignore you. Instead, uncover something in your request or in your alliance that will benefit him and emphasize it out of all proportion. He will respond enthusiastically when he sees something to be gained for himself. Chrollo is the undisputed leader of the troupe and commands the respect of his peers for the sake of the survival of the organization. However, his style of leading is not at all tyrannical, and he allows his peers the freedom to express themselves and their desires, which at times means allowing them to carry out acts of revenge that defy logic and reason. For example, he allowed Uvo to go after the chain user, who they knew next to nothing about, alone, because Uvo was angry he had disrespected him. This is a very emotional reaction and is definitely not in the best interest of the troupe, but Chrollo understands that if he were to try to mute Uvo's sense of freedom, this would eventually only hurt the organization in the long run, since the built-up resentment and anger would eventually result in the troupe turning against one another and losing their effectiveness, which is built on all the members wanting the same thing. Chrollo accepts the risks that comes with giving his subordinates this freedom, because he knows it is necessary for the long-term survival of the troupe. Now, this next law is interesting because it involves something that the troupe knows to be true but unintentionally broke. Law 15. Crush your enemy totally. All great leaders since Moses have known that a feared enemy must be crushed completely. Sometimes they have learned this the hard way. If one ember is left alight, no matter how dimly it smolders, a fire will eventually break out. More is lost through stopping halfway than through total annihilation. The enemy will recover and seek revenge. Crush him, not only in body, but in spirit. And that ember of course became Kurapika, who as we know from the series single-handedly had his way with the troupe, driven by his pure hatred and desire for vengeance. I've made a whole video on this on my channel, where ironically I analyze Kurapika's actions alongside another book, namely The Art of War, and how he applied its principles to best this criminal organization. The troupe of course thought they had applied this principle as they killed all the Kurta they were aware of. Regardless, one was kept alive, one who would give them more trouble than they could ever have expected. Law 17. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Humans are creatures of habit with an insatiable need to see familiarity in other people's actions. Your predictability gives them a sense of control. Turn the tables, be deliberately unpredictable. Behavior that seems to have no consistency or purpose will keep them off balance, and they will wear themselves out trying to explain your motives. Taken to an extreme, this strategy can intimidate and terrorize. The Phantom Troupe is essentially built off this unpredictability. Togashi constructed Chrollo as a character who himself doesn't know why he does what he does, but this lack of a defined motive makes the Phantom Troupe seem even more formidable. No one knows where they will appear next, so they leave an air of fear around their name. And since people don't know what it is that they want, they can't negotiate with them or try to tame them. An unpredictable wild beast that can't be tamed with nothing to lose. Togashi has constructed a perfect weapon in the form of a group who can hurt the outside world without being hurt. Togashi clearly has put a lot of thought into the construction of this group, and by looking at Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power, it becomes clear that many of the principles were applied, whether intentionally or unintentionally. The principles are timeless and have been used by emperors as far back as history goes, but it's still interesting that the book and Hunter x Hunter actually both came out the same year, 1998. The leadership dimension of Chrollo's character is a big part of what makes him such an iconic character, and hopefully this video was an entertaining way of understanding the power dynamics Togashi has constructed in the making of his iconic Phantom Troupe. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next one.